Hi everyone, this is CS116 and we are going to do the introduction to C++ programming. This is CS116 for ELAC and CS101 for LAVC. We are going to work on the introduction on C++ programming in this course. So this is the first chapter. So we are going to be oriented with the main terminologies and the introductory concepts. So there is no burden of doing any programming at this chapter. So this is the time for you to just get accustomed with your syllabus, download your software. We are using the Visual Studio for the Window users and Xcode for the Mac users. So as for example, my computer is Microsoft Microsoft Windows. So I just downloaded the Visual Studio software. This is 2022 Community Edition. The download is still going on, so just a word of caution that it is expected that the download will continue for quite some time. So don't freak out if it takes long time because it depends on your internet speed, your system's load, all kind of stuff. So that's something you should remember. Okay, let's proceed and let's get accustomed with the different terminologies. The objectives. I'm not going through in details about the objectives because partly you can go through the syllabus and get um, updated on the objectives. So, there are, we talked about four general purpose programming languages, namely, C, C++, Java, and C Sharp. So, do you know, anybody knows what are the basic characteristics of these languages? So, if you consider C, this is a procedural language mostly. The procedural language is the language which relies on functions, methods for the modularity. It does not support creation of objects. So, C language is a procedural language, but C has some advantages. That is, it is much lower level language. That is, it is very close to the compiler. So that's the great thing about the C language, and same thing goes to C++, but only C++ has the attribute that it supports object-oriented framework. Don't worry about these terms. We will probably learn about a little bit of object-orientedness. Then comes the Java. The Java is a relatively high level language and it requires it supports object oriented framework, and in fact C++ language supports both object oriented and procedural framework, but Java, uh, with Java everything is object. So that is the difference, but then this difference come with some prices. That is, Java always runs on virtual machine. That means you have to create some software. You have to have some software for Java to run, and it creates a virtual environment on the top of your actual hardware and actual operating system. So it does not interact very closely with the assembler. So in that way, Java is slow. Java is memory intensive language compared to C++ or C. C sharp similarly is not a low level language. It is also a high level language. C sharp is a general purpose programming language that first appeared in 2000 as a part of Microsoft's .NET initiative. It was designed for Common Language Infrastructure (CLI), an open specification developed by Microsoft, and it was later on standardized by other organizations. However, C Sharp applications are compiled into bytecodes similar to Java and that can run on implementation of the CLI. The language is used to build full stack web application backend API applications like Java, also the mobile apps for different frameworks. Anyways, so that's pretty much our exposure to different languages. As far as the applicability goes, uh, I mean, why we are learning C++ here? Because, C++ is a general purpose programming language. It is based on C language, but it has object-oriented features. That's why it is more appealing than C++. And, you know, you may wonder why you need to learn C++ when there are more contemporary languages like Java and C Sharp. They are available. You can see on the list. So, like any other modern languages, C Sharp, C++ is portable. That means it works with different operating systems and devices. And like many other languages that support object-oriented frameworks, C++ is ideal for development of large and complex applications. And there are a lot of applications that were built by C++. And if you think what types of applications are usually developed with C++, I mean, the answer is you name it, pretty much. I mean, due to its speed and efficiency, uh, C++ is commonly used for different applications such as systems programming, like let's say Linux operating system is built on C++ language. So it's a huge open source operating system. So you can see from there like how beneficial C++ language is. Then you have a lot of desktop applications, mobile applications, video games, performance critical applications, scientific applications, engineering applications, and embedded systems are programmed using C++. You also program the GIS mapping mapping applications with the C++. So it is very important to know. C++ is very commonly used uh, for a wide range of applications, especially where speed and efficiency are critical. So whenever we talk about C++, always remember two things: speed and efficiency. Okay? Okay, so let's go ahead. So that's what we were doing here. You know, speed, portability, scale, and of course, I mean, this has a solid demand in the market. There is a solid demand in the market for C++ developers. And uh, if you learn C++, it would be very easy to learn any other object-oriented languages like Java, C Sharp, and so on. There are different ISO standards. I mean, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. So they basically standardize scientific stuff all the times. And since 1998, C++ has been standardized by ISO. The standards have a long formal name. They are typically referred to by short informal name, like in this figure, ISO, IEC. I mean, all these cool, I mean, short abbreviation. Okay. So right now we are using C++ 20, I mean ISO 2020 version of the language. So it has been evolved quite a bit since it has started. uh, in fact, it was started in 1979. You know, um, it was, I mean, they started the C language. I mean, they evolved from the C language. They introduced the concept of object-oriented programming with C. But then um, that C with classes, or the C language with object-oriented features, are renamed as C++. In 1985, they had the first commercial implementation of this language, and then you will find there are a lot of other advancements of these languages. Next, we introduce the concept of application, or you can you can tell it as app. It's a computer software that performs certain task or related set of tasks. And this is an executable file basically. An application can also be referred to as a program. So when you talk about application app, you can also call it a program, even though one application may actually consist of multiple related programs. You know, a desktop application is a program that runs directly on your computer. There are two types of desktop applications that you could create with C++. One is the GUI application that uses some graphical user interface to, I mean, graphical user interface is basically, it's a user, I mean, human computer interface is easier so that a human user can interact very easily with the interface. It is self-explanatory. It gives you a lot of ease of uses. The examples of graphical user interface application includes the web application, of course, web browser. You have the websites, the web apps. You have the word processors like Microsoft Doc. You have the Excel. So those are the GUI, graphical user interface application. If you have ever used a web browser, you are already familiar with GUI application. However, you may not be familiar with the second type of the desktop application, which you are going to learn in this class actually. This type of application is known as console application. So console means your window. So if you open the command mode of your window, so if you click on the command prompt, then you should see that something like this pops up. So this is the console actually. Whatever you see here, this is the console. So if you are able to run a program here, then this is called a console application. So you will typically see an executable file, and that will constitute your console application. So one such console application you can see in the slide. Actually, I cut and paste it. So somebody is calculating the calculator for circle. So they enter the radius. From there, you can find the diameter, which is, I mean, radius 9 means diameter 18. Pretty simple math. And so that's circumference and the area and so on. So that's your console application. If you are using Mac, then it can be like this. It's similar, but look and feels a little different. Now, if you are going through the C++, then your source code will look like this. I mean, it may look at the first glance, it may look um, little different or little bit challenging, but this is how you can. I mean, this is what we are going to learn in this class. So don't worry about complexity in the language, but this is the syntax, this is uh, the flow of the C++ language. Typically with Visual Studio, you create a new project, you know, and you might choose a C++ project. So how come, I mean, how about choosing a C++ like, oh, okay, it's not Visual Basic, so we can choose the C++ here. Now you will find some applications, some templates basically. What we just saw that the installation of Visual Studio 2022 did not show any option with C++. You know, if similar thing happens to you, just go there and you can you can modify it, and then you see here ASP.NET, Azure, I mean all this stuff are checked on, but you have to do desktop development and Windows application development with C++. So mobile, you don't need mobile development in this class. So check these boxes, and then click on modify. Once you do that, it will start downloading stuff. So if your installation comes with C++, don't worry about it. It is applicable to the people who does not see cannot find any C++ template on their Visual Studio installation. Okay. So while this is running in the background, let's move on. So this is the C++, typical C++ code. We are not going through line by line for this code. We will learn it later. The how the C++ compiler runs, however, is a bit interesting stuff, and we should a little bit of we should try to understand it in a little bit detail. You know, so once the source code has been written, what you do, you just compile that, right? So here you can see your IDE, Integrated Development Environment. This is Visual Studio. Uh, Optionally, you can use the text editor as well, Notepad. But the problem is the IDE, like Visual Studio, that comes with lot of features which normal text editors do not support. So that's why we use Visual Studio. It's pretty easy to run and test and debug the application. So IDE or text editor, it goes to source code. So once you get the source code, you compile the source code into the machine language, you know. So, oh, so basically it is compiled and there are multiple steps in between. Now, what is the machine language? It is the end state. What is the machine language? The machine language is an example of low level language that is very close to your hardware. That's hard for humans to read, and understand. C++ is an example of high level language that's relatively easy for humans to read, interpret, and understand, but not too usable by computer until it is compiled into a low-level language. So the job of your compiler is to translate your high-level language into a language that is understandable to your machine. Okay? If you take a closer look at the compilation process, it shows that you typically use an IDE and edit the source code for a C++ program. Files that contain the source code often have an extension of .cpp. Sometimes most of the cases, we use an extension .cpp. That's how you write the C++ code. Now, in the first step, the preprocessor combines the source code with the source, I mean, combines your source code with the source code from any header files. You know, there are header files like in the source code, you may have, these are called the header files. You include the header files. So they also have the source code. Your compiler, your preprocessor combines your source code like this main function, this code with the code inside the header files. Okay, and then I mean that is the function of the preprocessor, and this results in a temporary file of expanded source code. You don't see it, but preprocessor does that job for you. In the second step, the compiler converts this expanded source code into machine language. The machine language, you know, the machine language actually um, at this intermediate step is called object code, and it's stored in a file called an object file. An object file often have an extension of .o or .obj. In the third step, the linker links the machine language in the object file with the object code from other libraries that have already been compiled, and it's like some utilities, some third-party libraries maybe. These libraries contain C++ code pre-written that performs various operations and tasks. Together, they are known as the runtime library. At the end, the compilation process yields a machine language file that can be executed on an operating system. On Windows, an executable file typically has an extension of .exe. If you have a file on Mac OS that typically has an extension of .app, sometimes you can have simply a.out. I mean, in a Linux machine, you will see an a.out file. Although, this compilation process is complex, right? It is done automatically with the push of a single key if you are using your IDE, Visual Studio, to develop your code. For now, you need to take away I mean, that from this picture that C++ source code is compiled into machine language that is run by the computer's operating system. So that's how your compilation process work. Okay, there can be multiple C++ IDEs. You have Visual Studio, you have Xcode, you have Eclipse, you have NetBeans. We are using Visual Studio or Xcode in this class. We are supporting. Uh, One confusion, many of you have asked me, can I use Visual Studio Code? Can I use GitHub um, code base? I mean, different code space. The answer is you can do anything, but you have to support yourself. If you have some issues with the code with some other platform, I am not going to able to I'm not be able to support it within this class. Also, if you upload a code written from any other place, and if that does not compile on Visual Studio, then I cannot take it granted as compiled code. So that's very important. So those are the rules that we have to be running by. I mean, same thing goes to for the Xcode as well. Okay. So those are the uh, IDEs. I mean, the main features provided by the IDEs are compilation of the code. It detects the error immediately, even before you compile it. It can it can lint your code. It can automate the compilation. It can debug. It can help you to debug the application. So those are very important. I mean, so what are the popular C++ compilers? So for Microsoft Windows Visual C++, you have, I mean, this is a compiler. Then you have the Clang, uh, that is often used in the Macs. There is a GNU compiler collection. I mean, it is used in the Unix-like systems and also in the Linux systems. Note that Linux is not Unix. There is a minimalist GNU for Windows, MinGW, native window version for the GCC compiler. So you, when you use Visual Studio, you are using this. When you are using Xcode, you are using that. These are pretty easy to understand. That's why to make your life easier, I put a constraint that you have to use Visual Microsoft Visual Studio or Xcode. Okay. By the way, my Visual Studio installer is still running, so again, it may take a little bit of time. Don't uh, freak out if it takes longer than expected time. Okay, this is normal. Since I do not have my Visual Studio ready yet, so you can see, I mean, I've taken a screenshot from, I'm using it from the slides. So this is a screenshot on how your program might look like under Visual Studio. So typically you can see when you create Visual Studio project, C++ project, it is a solution. Okay. So you have the solutions and this is the name of the code. And there you have the multiple files, but there are header files. You are not using any custom header files, but you are using a source file, source code main.cpp that lives here. To open the solution, you can press Ctrl Shift O or select File Open Project Solution. I mean, you will learn it as you go through the Visual Studio. Just play with it and you will learn it how to handle the projects using Visual Studio. So I'm skipping this part. I'm leaving it up to you to learn it. So this is how you are going to create a new project. So you go to create a new project from the files menu and you will see console application for C++. This one you should choose always for this class. Then you configure your project so you can do the new solution. I mean, you can configure the names, you can configure where you want to choose, store these applications and so on. Then you click the new project. I mean, that's basically the written statement of what I explained. And then inside the main CPP, you write the program and then click on, you can do build to see if it is building, or you can write, you can see the debug and click on this green button, then it will start debugging. Okay, it will start running, it will open a console for you. Similar exercise for Xcode. I'm not going details through Xcode because my computer is not a Mac. But if you are a Mac user, I would love to show you uh, when you can share your screen in an office hour, how to use that. So there is a detailed description about how to use Xcode um, using your Mac. So feel free to dive into these descriptions. as you want. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, that's what is the first week's presentation. And by now, what you must have learned is an outline of C++ compilation process. So how you run a C++ code from a source code. So you have a pretty good picture of it. Sometimes, we run code without even knowing how it compiles, how it is built, but it is useful to learn because then you will be able to evaluate the efficiency and different operating systems relevance in compiling the C++ code. So these are important in your professional career as well. You have to always pay attention to the bigger picture. So that's very important. So I think the main takeaway from this class for you is getting an introduction on C++ and then getting an exposure to the compilation process and then setting up your devices with the integrated development environment, which is Visual Studio in our case. Once you get your C++ templates downloaded, you know, as I said in the initial part of the lecture, um, you can create a new project. This is Visual Studio 2022, and you can use the Windows desktop application. Okay, and then you can move forward. Let's see, configuration. You have to do the proper configuration for the project. So we should choose console application. Let's see where we can find console application. So there is a console application, this one. So we should choose this one. So go to next. So this one, this is the console application. Go to next and you have this one. This is written in C++, of course. Place the solution and project in the same directory. I mean, it's up to you, but that's how it is done. Then you create the application. So it is creating your application, basically creating a solution in Microsoft Visual Studio. So you can see that this dynamicity, it is creating the project. So now it is being created. So here it is. You find it here. So you can see that a, sorry, you don't need to sign in to anywhere. You can just close it. So you can see that once the project is created, you have these files like you have the console application and then these files are there. So these names are default. You can change your names. I mean, you can make it main.cpp, doesn't matter. So this is the main function. And if you want to build the program, you have to do build and build solution. And you can see there is no issue found. If you want to, so it is being done right now. So there is no error, zero warning. So this is quite graceful. There is nothing written here as such. So now you can run it on your local Windows debugger. So on the green button, if you click it, then you will find that this console pops up and you can see that um, the hello world, this word is printed here. So this is your first C++ application. I mean, it will be good if you can provide a screenshot of that too, um, the, along with your assignment, but it is not mandatory. But you can start your discussions based on this knowledge. You don't need a book for starting the discussion, right, for this particular chapter. So let's start discussing about the C++ projects and what do we think about C++. Okay, so let's stop now. And you can always ask me questions through email. And thank you for watching this video. Talk to you later. Bye.